Next up is Joel Hollingsworth. He is the owner of Smoke River Ranch, who they are managing over 800 acres of grazing land in Oklahoma, one of the fastest growing grazing operations in the nation, and I'd question even the world. And Joel and I have, I've gotten to know him pretty well. I really respect his brain, how his brain operates. He's coming up with different solutions on how people in the next generation can fund projects like this. And he has a really, really great understanding of the economics and money and how it works. And he has a great understanding of ranching and how, I plan on working with him for a long time over the next 20, 30 years and how we can make sure that agriculture stays vibrant and successful in the U.S. and rural communities. So welcome, Joel Hollingsworth.
Howdy, everybody. I'm tempted to give it another second for the shuttles to get more people down here. You want me to just talk? Everybody having a good time? I love what Taylor's doing here. I'm just going to burn a little time before I really dive in. He's such a leader in this industry because Acres is one of the few places having real conversations. So many other conferences, other regenerative publications, they're experts in snorkeling, where we're having the same old conversations that we've been having for 20 years. And what's the use of all this advancement by Christine Jones and Elaine Ingham and John Kempf and Matt Powers and all this soil science if we're not having the hard conversations of how do we get the next generation taking the torch and implementing them? And Taylor has such a heart for speaking about the truth, wrestling at it in real ways, and bringing the real conversations to the forefront. And I couldn't be more grateful for the guy. The quality of things happening at the event Acres is putting on is such a notch above everything else. It's such a high signal-to-noise audience and people at every one of these things. So how many people here were at the panel that we did yesterday with the young and old ranchers? Is most everybody kind of mostly in the loop here? Yeah, I figured. So my name's Joel Hollingsworth. I run Smoke River Ranch in northeast Oklahoma. We've got about 500 head under management. We're grazing about 840 acres. We do Johann Zietzman style ultra high density grazing, meaning we pack the animals super tight. We're moving them probably 6 to 8 times a day at somewhere around typically 800,000 pounds to the acre. You can see on the slide, I know it's probably one small TV there, where we've got some examples of our post-graze of just how hard we graze and the grazing lanes with the cross sections where they back walk over them. We got a huge focus on trying to restore profitability for the industry. It's a lot of my talks and a lot of times with Acres and elsewhere is how do we get the youth engaged in the industry? How do we solve these kind of existential problems of the farm crisis and the aging demographics and the ranches and farming being passed on? So we've got a huge focus on our genetics program to develop animals capable of grazing like the wild ruminant ancestors of grazing intensely in fescue country. We've got a lot of unique financial models, like with our community-based system with herd shares, which I told some of the story of yesterday. But this talk, I'm mostly going to focus on the hard things. Most of the feedback I've been getting from a lot of the young people since yesterday, it's a hard thing being a change agent in the world. The first person through the wall gets the bloodiest. And all the people who are really pushing, whether you're talking Molly and Ryland, who I adore, whether you're talking the Harrises over at White Oak Pasture, there's this sense of weight that they're all carrying, that I carry every day. And you can see it in our eyes. We're tired. We fight to maintain having full hearts to stay the course and do what we're doing. And so many of the people that came up to me after the panel yesterday, that's what was in their heart, especially the young ones. They're just like, man, how do we keep up our hearts of hope to be able to just keep doing this? How do we not just get broken by the level of just friction against this to where we lose heart and give up at it, right? And so I was actually going to use this talk to just return to my roots. I originally wanted to be a preacher before I got into everything I'm doing today. So I figured maybe I'll ask forgiveness from Taylor rather than ask permission, but I'm going to lean back into that because it takes hope to be able to create change, because otherwise you can't carry the weight of it. And that's what keeps coming up every time I'm engaging in one of these topics. And it came up yesterday, right? We went on that roller coaster ride together of talking about my story. I guess I'll just share a brief of it in case anybody here wasn't there yesterday, where So I'm a young guy. I got into being passionate about regenerative agriculture because I had health issues. I went to college at VCU, started college in 2009. My first month or two at college, I got really sick. I lost about 20 pounds in 2 weeks. And my little brother has Crohn's disease. He got diagnosed super young at the age of 6. If one sibling has it, it's usually a coin toss 50-50 that another one has it. I showed some symptoms as a kid, but my family was so stressed and dealing with my little brother's major health issues, I kind of just kept it quiet and dealt with it. But when I went to college, I got really sick. And I went to the doctors on campus, and they put me on irritable bowel medication. It made me worse physically, and it made me suicidal. And I was just like, man, I watched my little brother go through this. I'm not taking this same path. He's on immune suppressants and stuff to this day. That pushed me into discovering Weston Price, kind of returning to the soil to find my health again. And I was able to rebuild to where I'm the strongest I've ever been, mentally clearest I've ever been. And that journey stoked a lot of passion about regenerative agriculture. And like a lot of young people, I dreamed about doing it, but how in the world am I ever going to get a start, right? And so my degree, I started in engineering school. I ended up finishing out in business economics, which I absolutely loved. I was smart enough for engineering, but I hated it. I realized when I got into statics and dynamics and Diffie-Q or whatever, advanced calculus, that I was like, man, I don't want to sit in a cubicle crunching numbers for somebody else the rest of my life. I want to be solving abstract problems, creatively thinking, and working with people and passion in the world. And so I moved over to the econ. Most of my life after school, I'd spent a lot of time in kind of blue collar, small business trades, entrepreneurship stuff. I also interned with a high speed tech startup guy who also became like a spiritual mentor and father to me. And it was a course that was wild, wandering, straight as an arrow to what I'm doing today. My dad, for the longest time, was like, boy, you're wasting all your potential. You're bouncing here doing that and here doing this, and you spend 6 months learning plumbing, then 6 months learning carpentry, and now you're interning at a guy who's a physicist developing cooling technologies and working with JBL doing this capital raise. What are you doing? And it took until about 2 years ago when my dad saw what I'm doing now. He sat me down and was like, son, I see it. Everything you did, God was in, and everything you did prepared you for what you're doing today. And that's what I want to talk about, where the story of the agriculture, where I got that Greg Judy style low-cost lease opportunity in Virginia. It was just right place, right time. I was running a fencing company doing residential and commercial privacy fences, and we had a lady ask us to come do a fence quote in rural Virginia because the city mowed over her fence in the ditch, and she needed to file an insurance claim with the city. And usually I didn't go to those things. My other buddy did most of the quotes who ran the company with me. Some of you guys know him, Daniel. And we were just that day, we're like, man, let's go over to the rural Suffolk together. We're going to have some fun today. It was we had a day where it felt like we're just going to make room for joy together and go on a drive and then go hike somewhere afterwards. And it was funny, just following that heart of joy in the world led to a connection where while we were there putting the quote together, she just happened to bring up how she stopped doing the grants or subsidies, or whatever you want to call it, where she's paid not to farm, right, which happens through a lot of the country, paid not to do cotton or soy or whatever and stuff where they're having those programs. And she felt that was unethical, so she canceled it all. And then she didn't realize this would happen, lost her tax deductions for agriculture. It's a recreational farm for horses, which doesn't count. And so she'd been trying to find people to lease the ground from her, and everybody wanted to spray herbicides and pesticides, and she didn't want that happening near her horses and her people who were there as a part of the horse community, right? And she was just bemoaning to us of, man, I wish I could find one of those young people to do that Joel Salatin or Greg Judy regenerative grazing thing. And so I'm sitting there listening to her, and I'm just I feel like God is in this, and this is your future. Just step in, and I'm okay, I'll do it, And at the time, I had no money for cattle. I had no idea how in the world I'd pull it off, but it was that moment where I felt this is your future. Lean in, So I did. I ended up signing a lease with her for 28 acres for $1 a year. Not enough acreage to really make any money. As a lot of you guys know, that's still hobby scale. But I knew that God had something in it if I just stepped. So I leaned in, and signed it with her. I obviously had fencing experience. I'm out there learning about electrical fencing and putting in hot wire and putting videos on Twitter. I joined Twitter in 2019 because I wanted to learn about Bitcoin. It was this place where a lot of the work I was doing in small business and community building, I'd seen stories of, like, in particular, a dairy that'd been a multi-generational dairy. They sold a lot direct to community in cash, and typically when they go to the bank, it'd be in like $8,000 to $11,000 increments. Well, they got charged with cash structuring for money laundering, even though it's how they'd run their small community farm for a generation. The government froze their bank account, and they went out of business because what farm can run without your operating capital for, like, I think it was like 270 days? The government kept their account frozen. And so I watched some of these stories happen, and I was like, man, like, once again, being a change agent is hard. Anytime you're doing something different, you're going to find opposition. I was like, there has to be a way to protect yourself from some of this overreach. And I started asking questions. It's like, well, before I try to build something from zero as an idea, maybe somebody in the world's working on it. And I found Bitcoin. And back in 2019, there wasn't near as many resources and books as there are now. So I joined Twitter. It's where all the crazy Bitcoin kids hung out. And so I was hanging out, picking people's brains, learned about this weird technical money thing of digital currency. And so, like, I don't know how many of you guys know about Bitcoin, but from 2019, the next like 2 years, 2020, 2021, Bitcoin went from $5,000 a Bitcoin to $69,000. And I was able to catch that curve, which really helped me kind of get onto my feet as a young guy to have some more opportunity. But at the same time, I was on Twitter hanging out, and when it did that crazy run, my Twitter account grew from a couple hundred people to, I think, 20,000 something followers. And so I started getting more visibility. And so my Twitter account grew. I'm posting videos of this little regenerative project I'm working on, and I get a DM from a wealthy Wall Street guy, and he's like, hey, I went in on this regenerative grazing thing you're doing. I was like, no, you don't. I'm going to use heritage breed swamp cows to build zombie apocalypse cattle because the world's getting chaotic and I want to be super resilient. They're horned and spotted with no resale value. And I'm going to push the edge of regenerative grazing science as a smart kid who's never done this before. And I'm going to make all sorts of mistakes. You have no reason to want to do this because there's no money in this. And he's like, yes, I do. I was like, you're insane. Tell me why. And he wrote me a letter where he explained that he was in the kind of investment banking hedge fund world. He's like, look, like all of our reports from our analysts are coming back saying the U.S. is starting to get onto war footing with China. Nobody's talking about it yet. He said most of our amino acids for animal feed supplements, most of our medical input all come from China. He said, I'm worried about food security for my family, not measured in calories, because I can stock the basement with grains and things. I'm worried about it from the sake of quality. He said, I'm also tired of being worried about my investments and retirement accounts and things being in the mainstream markets because I'm worried about, like, same thing with the civil asset seizures and things and cash structuring and, like, all those kind of laws of overreach happening. And this was before COVID. This was 2019, 2020, before COVID when these conversations started. He just foresaw a lot of what actually ended up happening in the world. And then he also said that I'm tired of holding ETF type instruments where BlackRock is buying assets to lease them back to my children. He said, I want to own real things of hard assets in the real world inside of relationships and communities that I trust that make the world be as the world I want it to be for my children. I was like, oh, wow, okay, I think we're aligned. And so we put our heads together, came up with the herd share program. And so the way that worked, he bought the original breeding stock. We came up with a contract where I had full control as the manager, where I get to make all the decisions, I get to fine-tune the genetics. He could withdraw animals over long time horizons, but we had that kind of alignment of vision for the long term. And we set that agreement up. When we wrote it, I just felt like God had given that idea to us. I knew from the first moment it was something magic. And we bought 15 heads, started up in Virginia, and then COVID happens. My phone just blows up after that. All his friends, all these people on Twitter start calling me, like, those herd share things, can I get some of those too? And I'm like, I have 28 acres. I don't have space for any more cows. I was like, but yeah, we'll figure this out. Like, you don't catch a wave like this twice in your life. And once again, I felt God in it. So I leaned in, raised some capital with some friends. And once again, crazy story. I brought some of this up yesterday, right, where we we talk about the youth and like whether it's possible to build things in this industry. And honestly, I get kind of frustrated because a lot of the thought leaders in the space, they're not really being honest. It's one of the things I love about the Harris family is I was at their presentation for Jenny's presentation yesterday, and we had a great lunch afterwards where she was telling me about their ranch finances and how they bought up a ton of land. They didn't really plan for the inflation to happen, but they doubled their acres. They got the land at a pretty good price, and then they got it reappraised. And a lot of what's made them successful is that they caught the land appreciation curve, which has nothing to do with how you're doing running the farm, right? And that same problem is out competing the youth to be able to buy in. And so knowing all that, the way I raised the capital for the land, I said, we're going to build a land holding company. We're going to buy a piece of ground. We're going to never pay any money of leases to the land holding company, sort of roll it all into trying to solve the problems and forerunning things for the young generation. And we're never going to sell the ground, so you're going to have a hard asset that goes up in value that you never get to actually access or have any sale value from. Who would like to join? And we ended up raising $800,000 on those terms. And the way it happened was purely just a miracle. Like my sage always says, miracles take a lot of hard work. So you have to hold open the space until they arrive. Most of the capital that came in was people who'd been following me and watching me on Twitter for a while, and I've been living with character and honesty, and they'd seen it and know it. But they reached out and be like, hey, I had my morning devotion time today, and God told me I'm supposed to be a part of your mission. So I got 50 grand I'm going to put in, and I need to be able to explain it to my wife, so can you like tell me enough to be able to justify this? I'm like, okay, this is cool. And so like a lot of times, like the way I think about in my heart of what I'm doing, it's been this really beautiful privilege because like King David said in the Psalms, like the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. God has given me a good inheritance. It's that I've been given the privilege to have the support where God launched me into something that wouldn't have been possible on my own. And that's what I want to lean into in this conversation, right? Like there's a verse that's been in my heart all weekend. It's that the light of the righteous is like the first light of dawn. It gets brighter and brighter until the full light of day. And I want to talk about what it's like being somebody trying to carry the weight to change things in the world, right? So like some of my story that's woven in there that I've not really talked about publicly before. When 2009, senior year of high school, I really kind of got woken up by God, where we were doing Saturday night kind of church services that were really vibrant. There was a group of young guys leading the worship and a very passionate pastor who'd taken over, trying to like build an authentic Christianity back into the youth of our church again. And it was incredible. And I remember one day where I was in a service and I just felt God speak to me of like, do you want to do something worthwhile in the world or keep just screwing around and wasting your potential? And I remember just being on my knees, just crying my eyes out, bawling. In that moment, I'm just, yes, whatever it takes. And in that moment, I even remember just laying there on my face and God speaking to me, if you say yes to this, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer more than you know in ways you don't comprehend. And I remember my young self. I went home the next day. I started getting really into physical fitness because I was like, okay, like if I'm going to suffer, I'm going to end up being a missionary in a third world country, going to like Burma where like Bibles are illegal with my missionary friend from like high school who also teaches CAD that I was buddies with. And so I started doing like push-ups and pull-ups, and I cut down a stick of bamboo and gave it to my brother. I was like, beat me with this to make me tough in case I got to suffer, you know. And my little brother was like, no, this hurts my heart. And I'm like, it was so funny. But I love my brother to death. But most of the suffering has not been physical. It's been this, how do you maintain the existential pressure of being vulnerable, of standing openly in the tension with hope as you are standing in the gap with doing something bigger than you that you have no ability to cross the chasm to get there. And that was something that nobody prepared me for. I like back in college, I remember when I first, because I started after God got a hold of me in second half of the senior year of high school, where I got really deep into scripture. I'd get up every morning and I was just ripping through reading the Bible. And I remember like I'd read like the book of Isaiah over the course of 2 days. I read the Bible through cover to cover like multiple times a year. I was reading the ancient saints and reading like a lot of old philosophers and like Epictetus or like Saint Athanasius, like on the incarnation, and I remember going to college, and I was just kind of excited because I could get away from a lot of the distractions and pressures of what it was like in the place where I grew up. I grew up with a great family and a great Christian school and church, but like I had a hunger to go deeper, and I was struggling to kind of get there inside of that circle where I had to be faithful to a lot of things. And that first semester of college, God just kind of spoke to me of like, look, like spend this first semester getting close to me. So I did. Like every moment I was either in class or studying to take a test or doing homework or like just on the floor worshiping, singing, praying, or studying like scripture. And then the second semester, God basically just was like, go. And so I went out and I ended up within like 2 weeks meeting basically everybody influential on campus who was leading a Christian ministry or a church or something like that. And ended up founding a morning prayer group that met in the center of ECU's campus, kind of liberal Richmond, Virginia, to where we got together every day for an hour of worship and prayer. At first, it was just me for weeks or month or two. Then 3, 4 people joined, and then we hit the knee of the curve where it just went exponential. I mean, we started having like miracles occur. Like we had a guy there who was actually one of the guys who played guitar and led it with me sometimes, where he had big old thick Coke bottle glasses. He was almost on the edge of being technically like not quite blind, but close. And he was playing worship one day, and he took his glasses off while he was playing and just kind of closing his eyes, praying with us. And then when he went to put the glasses back on, it was blurry. He couldn't see anything. He took them back off. He could see perfectly, and his eyes never went back again. Right, like that was the energy of what was happening then. And that happened for a semester-ish or two. I don't remember exact timelines. And I go home and then come back the next semester, and it just had gone crazy. Like it was to the point where I would go into different cities, like an hour or two away in Virginia, and people would know my name. They're like, "Oh, you're Joel, like the super prophet leading this thing at VCU." And at that moment, God spoke to me and put this down. You're not ready to lead this because you're not ready as a man to handle the weight of what this is going to be. And out of obedience, I did. I laid it down. It fizzled out within a couple weeks when I put it down. And I basically just went into the caves where I was like, okay, if I'm not ready, what does it mean to get ready? And that started a journey that ultimately led to me meeting this guy who was also the tech entrepreneur, where I was in my room one night praying. I was like, God, like, I've ripped into everything I know to pursue or learn, and I don't know what I'm missing. I need help. And he told me to go somewhere at a certain time in a certain place, and the place he sent me was a parachurch ministry full of crazy people. And I was like, God, you want me to go where? He's like, I know, go anyway. And so I show up, and Tim, my mentor, he had that day been invited to play worship at that place. He also knew it was crazy people. He'd sworn off playing worship at places like that because he knew the preacher, and he knew it was just leading people astray. And he had said, like, I'm just so tired of using my gift of music to open people's hearts for them to be led astray by false preachers. And God was like, I know, go anyway. And I walk in the door, and he sees me, and he knew I was why he was there. And that started a journey where he became a sage and a mentor and ultimately a spiritual father to me. And the first thing he ever asked me, he said, if your father was a king and a creator, what would he train his sons to be? In the whole journey of what's now become over 15 years of walking with him as a father in my life has been a story of knowing God as my father, where in the practical day-to-day of everything we're doing, how do I actually relate to him as a son, to where he's training me to be like he is in the world, right? Like going back to one of the early saints I read, Athanasius, he said that Christ became what we are so that we might become what Christ is. And in that journey, right, like I had one theme in my heart. It's that I want to know God as who he truly is, and I want to become like him. I want to be capable of living in the world as Christ did, kind of continue the incarnation, right? Like be a light that actually goes back to the original mandate where be fruitful, multiply, go and take dominion, do the work of taking the garden, go on the adventure in the wilderness, and make the world look like Father's kingdom, make it look like heaven. And it was funny. One of the first conversations I ever had with Tim, kind of later after that first question, was like, he said, "Look, I'm a inventor. I build multi-million-dollar companies, create new technologies the world's ever seen." He said, "But the only way I know how to do this is because like a easy way to explain it be, you ever hear the story about like Einstein, where he was working on the theory of relativity, and another physicist at the time thought that he had come up with the physics theory of everything, which the physicists are always trying to do, and he presented it to Einstein, and Einstein flipped through it for like just a minute or two and threw it on the ground. It's like, this is wrong. The guy's like, you didn't even look at it. How do you know it's wrong? And Einstein's, it's not beautiful. And the way Tim explained it to me, he's like, look, like when you know Father, when you know the Creator, when you've spent your life like King David, like the one thing I seek is to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and spend my days like celebrating it, right? Like you begin to recognize Father's fingerprints in reality. Like there was that spat like in the early kind of electrical science with like Einstein, or not Einstein, with Edison and Tesla. And Tesla has a funny quote where he's making fun of Edison. He goes, if Edison was given a problem of finding a needle in a haystack, he would begin diligently picking up every piece of straw and then examine it to see if it was the needle. And he said if Edison would have just taken a little bit of time to figure out what the right question was, he could have saved himself 90% of the work. And what Tim taught me was how when you ground your life in worship like King David did, it helps you understand how to recognize God's fingerprints to know what the right questions to ask are. And it energizes your ability to be able to solve problems in the world, because knowing the right question lets you move very quickly to synthesize and be able to challenge paradigms and change things, right? And so he was like, well, I can teach you how to walk with God and change the world, but if you try to do this on your own, everything I teach you is useless. I'm like, fine by me. That's what I want. And so the journey became one where where Christ, where he was going into the city to be crucified into Jerusalem, and he made that statement. He goes, the enemy's coming for me, but he has nothing on me, right? Like one of the principles Tim taught me is that your ability to walk with power or authority in the world, to be trusted by God with things, is directly correlated to your level of holiness. Like the whole idea, like where Paul talks about in Scripture, like working out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's walking forth that true work of Christ, where you've been baptized into his death, raised again a new creation. His Spirit dwells inside of you, to where walking with God, you can, with his power, his voice, his co-authoring of your identity alongside yours, you can become like Christ, capable of more than you ever could on your own, right? And so walking that out with Tim led me forward into the world where I rooted my life in obedience, where Tim trained me to, like King David, right? Like, go wait among the balsa trees, wait until you hear the marching in the treetops, and I've gone with you. And that's largely where we are, right? Where you've got so much of the youth and all of us that are trying to be change agents, and it feels like Joshua and Caleb in the promised land, right? Where Moses sent in the spies and 10 of them come back of like, this is terrifying, the land's full of giants, this is impossible, like we should just go back to Egypt and be slaves because at least we had food there, you know? And it's that fear, it's that cowardice, right? And versus you got Joshua and Caleb, where they come back and they're like, the land is flowing with milk and honey. The grapes are so big you can hardly carry them. Like, God has given us a beautiful inheritance. Let's go do it. Let's go get it, right? And it's the difference of approaching the world where you're looking at the challenges, whether or not you have to do it on your own strength and your own wisdom, or if you're going with God. Like from day one when I started my ranch, I told the young guys that chose to kind of come with me and build this place that our number one responsibility is to maintain connection to the favor of God. Like, if you're going to be on the team, your commitment is you're going to live worthy of that in everything you do. Your heart, your attitude, your character, your posture, your approach, your willingness to enter into discipleship and iron sharpen iron to grow as a young man worthy of being able to, like, be trusted with things like this in the world. And it's the ability to surrender to that in obedience that opens up the possibilities of doing more than you're capable of on your own. It's that, like I think it's G.K. Chesterton who talks about courage, where it's like the dancing on the precipice, right? It's that rootedness in obedience to where you're not ever distracted by success or failure. Like as Tim would tell me, you've got to get to where your place of worship, of knowing your place as a son of God, is the biggest thing to you. Because when that's the biggest thing, nothing else distracts you. Like, I remember early on where there's a lot of these miracles happening in my life, much like how the land company got funded. And I was praying about it. I was like, God, like, why are you opening so many doors for me? Why are you giving me so many of these answers when, like, it seems like there's so many people out there who are so much better suited for this, like, who have a base of capital to start from, or like the skill of knowing how to do things. Like, why am I the one who's receiving these gifts? And kind of humblingly, God said to me, it's like, look, like, I'd give them to anybody I would ask, but nobody's asking. Nobody's seeking. Nobody's coming to me for it. They're all trying to do it without me. And that journey there with the young guys who committed themselves to come with me being committed to that, and the training of Tim teaching me how to lead and walk that way, has been the thing that's made it possible to walk in the world where we're handling these challenges, right? I can take on not only the things with the economic challenges, the challenges of the youth and the labor force. Like, in my handful, 4 years, whatever, of building the project of Smoke River Ranch, I've been through 2 hostile takeover attempts, 1 majorly well-funded character assassination attempt, a couple major betrayals, basically any one of which would have just shattered what most people were doing. And then on top of that, right, like, all the struggles of trying to make it profitable and scaling a ranch as fast as we did, from no money, no land, no cows, all the way up to where we are today. I mean, that's hard enough on its own. And that ability to know that I'm not alone, to walk with Father to where, as Tim said, miracles take a lot of hard work. So you have to hold open the space until they arrive. Of being obedient from a worship heart like King David, where you're staying in sync with the pillar of cloud and fire, where God goes with you and before you. That's been the thing where I can keep a heart of hope no matter how high the tension is that would break you, right? Like, I have the dark nights. Like, Erin and I were in D.C. on Wednesday. I was presenting with her in front of the House about the food as medicine legislation, and I got to represent regenerative ranchers. And I get out of that, and I immediately get the text from my guys about another subpoena coming in. And I didn't sleep well that night, like, it's not easy to maintain that posture. It's a choice. But it's a choice of knowing I'm not alone. And time again, the last 4 years, that's been true. I've not been alone, and God has gone with me. And there's been so many cases where, like, a lot of our community's Bitcoiners. It's kind of like where I got my start on Twitter, and a lot of the early herd show owners were. And Bitcoin went through its crash twice in the last handful of years. And we, this last crash where it came down from 120 something back down to like 60s or 70s where it are now, like, it hurt a lot of our network and a lot of our backers. And I was looking at this year where I'd been planning on some of those families buying herd shares and helping us scale into, been a keep growing the herd to get all the way up to being sustainable this year and next year. Every one of them were like, man, like, we can't do it right now, even though we'd been planning on it. I was like, man, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. God, I need help. I'm terrified. And then every time I get scared, the same thing happens where I'm at the end of my rope. I, like, can't handle the tension. I'm feeling that sense of despair and alone. And the next morning I get a text message from one of the members of our herd share community. And he's like, hey, I got an interesting dilemma. He says, I need to tax loss harvest. Can you sell me a bunch of herd shares? I'll buy them in Bitcoin, and I need to lose a bunch of money. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah. And over and over and over again, Father's been with us with provision, and I've learned just to trust it. That every time something feels like it's intended to stop me, what the enemy intends for evil, God ends up using for good. It's been one of those cases, like, and that's part of why the lawfare stuff's not scaring me. I mean, whatever happened to, like, innocent until proven guilty? Whatever happened to, like, Fourth Amendment of, like, not subject as an American to unreasonable search or seizure, or the rights to privacy and freedom, right? Like, the court case is going to probably end up to where I'm trying to protect the privacy and the freedoms of the herd share owners. It's going to go before an administrative judge if I can't win it in the like administrative tit for tat legal debates where I'm burning capital like crazy to do it. And then an administrative judge, there's no jury of my peers. Like whatever happened to the Constitution of that? And then it's going to be the luck of the draw. Where is the judge going to rule where it's like a hold me in contempt because I won't give in and violate the trust of our community, and he could issue a bench warrant and try to put me in jail, right? Like, what keeps me to where I can maintain a posture of rest, to stand with integrity in the unfolding, to hold the space for the change to happen in the world, is that day in and day out, week in and week out, I've seen every time that something tries to come and stop us from being obedient and faithful to the mission God's given us, that what's intended to stop us always becomes the launching platform to get us to the next level of solving the problems. And it's been beautiful. It's been painful. I've spent so much time crying. And my team has learned to lean into it. Like, it's been a beautiful story. Like, one of my young guys, he super smart kid. He's got a degree in finance with a business or a mathematics minor. He should probably be he's a genius. He's probably IQ 140 or higher. You guys know him, Liam. And he should probably be in a hedge fund trading tech stocks, making millions. And we had one time some herd share owners at the ranch visiting, and we were all having dinner or something, and Liam walked by, and they were like, "Why are you here?" Because he's got so much just potentially genius of what he could be doing in the world. They're like, "You're on a farm," and he's got a heart of studying like ancient culture and Greek and Roman history and like reading like Cicero's On Virtue, and has a heart to kind of return to like Renaissance men of early American like citizenship and responsibility to like make your society better and more whole. And so he puts his sunglasses on and looks at him for a second and goes, "Because I refuse to be domesticated," just walks out the door. And so with him, I kept throwing him into the fire as a young guy. He wasn't a Christian. He grew up very secular. And he saw us kind of living this forth and miracle after miracle, keeping the farm alive. And he was a fun guy because he saw where I was going in the mission, and he believed in it because he's smart enough to know, like, this is what a good solution in the world has to look like. He didn't know where the spiritual stuff fit in. He just saw that we were handling the pressure of it, and he was like, "Well, I'm going with you. You're not going somewhere where I'm not coming." And so he actually interned with me without pay or anything for a year. And I ended up giving him equity in the company because he's just chosen to be a right-hand man guy to go with me. But I kept putting him into leadership positions, putting more and more weight on him. And every time he'd be almost ready to handle it, I just put him under more pressure. And one day he comes to me and sits me down and goes, "Joel, I can't live the way I'm hungry to live in the world." He's like, "I'm trying to be the leader I know I'm supposed to be. I can see the leader I know I'm supposed to be. But I do not have the inner character to be able to hold a posture of grace to give patience to those you're putting me in charge of while things are just as terrible as they are with things going wrong." Because I told my guys from the beginning, like, what it means to be worthy of leadership is that you're capable of comporting yourself with patience and grace while living under duress of being misunderstood and maligned while you're doing everything right. And he's like, I can't do it. And I was like, "Buddy, that's why I'm a Christian and why I walk with God." And I spent an hour and a half walking him through the gospel, start to finish. And he's like, "Okay, I get it. What do we do?" I'm like, "Let's go to the river." So we just phone called a bunch of the guys in the community who'd been like families that had been a part of this guy's life and were influential. And we went to the river, baptized him. He came out of the water a new kid. Before, like, he struggled with eye contact. He like super smart, but kind of a little autistic almost, where that relational connection was always a challenge for him. And from that day forth, he was a new person, to where his capacity for grace, his presence of heart, his ability to love the people he's leading was higher than it had ever been. And he just went like gangbusters, like a fire, after how to like grow all the way into being ready and worthy of this. And that's where I keep coming back to, where so many of the young people in this industry keep coming to talk to me of, how do you handle this pressure? How are you not breaking? How do you not lose heart? How can you stand in the fire like this and still see it as a privilege and a joy and get up and be so happy every day? And it's because of the fact that I've learned that the greatest form of worship is obedience, and that when you live a life rooted in obedience to go with God where you're not alone, that his power of redemption, like even with Abraham, right, where there wasn't just provision and wisdom and the ability for Abraham to become wealthy by being a good herdsman and leading his family well, but he'd have kings come after him, and God would give the kings dreams and move kings out of his way so that Abraham could be faithful to the call, right? And the ability to rest in that, of knowing that you are not alone, and that when you obey, whether was it Daniel in the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that like our God is with us, but even if he doesn't come save us, he's capable of, even if he doesn't, this is what I'm going to do because it's right. It's that Chesterton idea of like, what is it? Like seek death like water, or seek life like water, but drink death like wine. That faith of maintaining that posture enables you to be a change agent in the world where the pressure doesn't break you. I'd encourage everybody that if you want to be engaged in this industry, which is critical for American sovereignty, American strength, of the foundation of every nation is agriculture, and we live in a world that's at war, and we battle not against flesh and blood, and we see so much centralization and tyranny, and the middle class of everybody wanting to just return kind of the resettling of America to kind of undo the problems Wendell Berry talks about and the neighborliness. That entering into that requires us returning, like the founding fathers said, that this system of government only works for a just and moral people. And it was founded with a lot of them being Christian. And if we want to get the strength of our nation back, we need to return to the heart of who we once were. Very much like Pennsylvania and William Penn, that heart of serving our nation through worshiping God in all we do, of love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, is the foundation of being leaders in our society, and success and ability to do everything else flows from it. Thank you very much.